alliteration to go to the thesaurus and find 3 words that are like collusion but not collusion. These were his words: collaborate, convene, and coordinate with other members of the climate cartel to impose their ideological agenda on the American people. This climate cartel consists of left-winged activists, dominant financial institutions, and the groups and initiatives that facilitate the collusion among them. Specifically, groups like Climate Action 100+ expressly require the investors who join them to pressure the companies they invest in to, quote, decarbonize and reach net zero emissions. Asset owners like California Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS, and asset managers like Arjuna Capital then use the investments they control to force companies to disclose their carbon emissions, to reduce their carbon emissions, and to adopt governance mechanisms that enforce these commitments, even though these commitments are bad for investors and consumers. The climate cartel engages in a series of escalating pressure tactics to force American companies to act against their own self-interest and adopt its desired left-wing policies. First, the climate cartel leverages its investment holdings to demand meetings with corporate management. If corporations refuse to cave, the climate cartel then escalates to filing shareholder resolutions, demanding that companies take action. Groups like Climate Action 100+ then, quote, flag these resolutions, drawing greater attention to them and making them even more effective. If companies still fail to bow to its demands, the climate cartel then seeks to replace members of their boards of directors. Notably, the climate cartel did so at ExxonMobil in 2021, replacing 3 directors with members of its own choosing. The climate cartel's commitment and demands reduce output and raise prices for American consumers. There's no way to reach, quote, net zero without reducing production and diminishing the American standard of living. These negative impacts are especially pronounced in the fossil fuel, aviation, and agricultural sectors. In other words, the very industries that allow Americans to drive, fly, and eat. For example, the climate cartel has said that fossil fuels must, quote, stay in the ground to reduce carbon emissions. Similarly, the climate cartel has called for reducing the number of airplane flights by 12% and capping passenger air travel to 2019 levels. Likewise, the climate cartel has called for cutting American beef consumption roughly in half because, quote, cows are the new coal. This sort of anti-competitive collusion has been illegal under the U.S. antitrust laws for more than a century. Yet the Biden administration has refused to take action to enforce the law and protect American consumers. In today's hearing, we will investigate the climate cartel, its anti-competitive collusion, and the harm it continues to inflict on the American economy and people. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Correa, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all our witnesses for being here today. Attorney General Ellison, welcome back to Congress and to this committee, sir. And Mr. Dan Bienvenu, Chief Investment Officer for CalPERS. I know your work, served in various committees in the state legislature overseeing CalPERS and CalSTRS, and let me just say, as a former state employee, as a legislator, I have a personal vested interest to make sure you're doing a good job. And if you don't, I'll call you. Mr. Chair, thank you for your opening remarks. I just want to be clear that this hearing is not about antitrust law or antitrust violations. This hearing is about going after responsible fiduciary investing and shareholders who are essentially exercising their legal rights under the law. Going after state-run pensions and private asset managers for carrying out their fiduciary duties of considering risk and value, and by trying to limit shareholders' rights. This essentially harms every American on Main Street. We depend on asset managers to take care of our hard-earned money. When hardworking Americans retire, they want to make sure that our pensions are safe and secure. Americans are looking for a handout. We want to make sure that our hard-earned pensions and savings are secure for today and tomorrow. While some of us may not like how asset managers and pension funds invest their money, their job is to invest to meet their needs and wishes of their clients. The job is not to make all of us happy. Asset managers are led by 2 basic principles. maximizing return, and responding to clients' wishes. Following these principles, they have generated excellent returns for their clients. Maximizing returns means calculating short-term and long-term risk. And Wall Street is really good at figuring out quarterly profits. But I would say pension managers like CalPERS need to focus on long-term returns and long-term risks and trying to figure which industries and which companies will be successful and alive and profitable in decades to come. CalPERS, you are good at that. And many companies are doing the same thing. Even the oil and gas industry, excuse me, because they know they must adjust and prosper decades from now. This is a sheet from ExxonMobil advancing their climate solutions in 2024. Clients are demanding that asset managers consider long-term risks like climate change. And many Americans see the devastating effects, the impacts of climate change in our society. And many Americans feel the price of climate change at and in their pocketbooks. Almost every day, we see destruction, destroyed houses, flooded streets, communities ruined, and American insurance rates are going through the roofs if they even get insurance. And I know back home, a lot of home owners can't get insurance today. The impact has had especially terrible impact on affordable housing, which compounds our already severe housing shortage. And extreme weather like this will cost the U.S. economy nearly $93 billion. 93 was last year. God knows what it'll cost us this year. And in fact, in 2023, that's last year, was the hottest year on record. And 2024 is expected to surpass that record. These are the facts. And responsible asset managers have the duty, the legal fiduciary duty, to take these risks into account. And if you don't believe me, look at the numbers. Countless studies support the financial wisdom of using climate risks in general risk asset management. The Government Accounting Office, or GAO, found consensus among institutional investors that a company's long-term financial performance can be substantially affected by sustainability-related issues. And 1,000 plus studies found, among other things, that managing for a low-carbon future improves financial performance. Let me say that boycotts, divestitures of any specific industries just don't work. Instead, they cause chaos and undermine asset managers and asset owners' ability to carry out their fiduciary duty. And this is why CalPERS and other concerned state officials oppose boycotts and divestitures. But let's be clear here today. There is no boycott of the oil and gas industry. The top three asset managers, CalPERS and Arjuna as well, collectively have oil and gas holdings in the hundreds of billions. For CalPERS, it's in its top 10 industry holdings. And BlackRock alone has invested $225 billion in the American energy sector on behalf of its clients. Today, we are seeing an attack on shareholders. This is wrong. Remember, shareholders are owners in a company, and they have legal rights as owners to vote and demand information and inspect corporate records. Responsible shareholders hold corporations accountable. And we know what happens when they don't do that. The Enron collapse, just one of many that have cost investors and pensioners dearly. Shareholders have the absolute right to organize and influence the companies that they own, working together to make sure the company is successful And this is called capitalism. This is called free enterprise. And we should encourage it. It's pro-competitive, pro-democratic, and pro-free market. This hearing today is not about antitrust. This hearing is an attack and a way to intimidate responsible parties for carrying out their fiduciary duties. These allegations in a courtroom would fail. And trust me, there's a lot of trial lawyers ready to go to take up these causes of action and sue. But let's put the final nail on this coffin of this so-called antitrust allegations. There is no agreement. There is no restraint of trade. And there's no harm to competition. And thus, no antitrust violation. This committee received over 250,000 documents, over 2.5 million pages. Let me repeat, over 2.5 million pages. And within those pages, there's no evidence of any wrongdoing. Labeling something a cartel doesn't make it a cartel. First, let me talk about the agreement. There's no agreement. More specifically, there's no evidence of collusion or price fixing, and there's not a shred of evidence supporting a hub-and-spoke conspiracy, the way a cartel would work. And in fact, parties always have made investment decisions independently and have been advised to do so by nonprofits working in the sustainable investment arena. There is no boycott. On the contrary, the investigation showed that asset managers targeted by this investigation collectively maintain immense holdings in the oil and gas industry. There's no harm to competition, no restriction on output. Oil and gas companies' returns have skyrocketed, and production is at an all-time high. And the markets is expected to grow dramatically through year 2030. This confirms the lack of harm, which is an essential element to this supposedly antitrust violation. We've talked about a lot of technical legal terms today, but back home, what my constituents care about is the price of energy, the price of gasoline at the pump. And if you want to blame somebody for high gasoline prices, look at the OPEC cartel again, which just a few days ago again agreed to continue cutting its output through the year 2025 to counter U.S. production increases. As OPEC cuts production, the price of oil and gas will remain high, even with domestic production at record levels. Folks, don't blame sustainable energy for rising gasoline prices. It's not investment in sustainable energy that caused high gas prices. Didn't happen in the 1970s, and not now. If we want to bring down price of energy, let's encourage competition among energy sources. Supporting sustainable energy through investing is the winning approach. Investing in sustainable energy is what will lower gas prices, increase innovation, produce jobs, improve the environment, and reduce our dependence on foreign energy. Investing in sustainable energy is increasing competition, improving consumer choices, and enhancing our national defense. Let me conclude by saying that after this hearing, 3 things will be clear. First, that financial organizations we're investigating here today, including CalPERS and Arjuna, are investing according to your fiduciary duty. You are taking care of your clients, their beneficiaries, according to the law. Efforts to undermine this will greatly harm our capitalist system and undermine innovation. Second, shareholders have the right. Actually, shareholders have the duty to speak up when the company is poorly managed, when corporations have not considered all the risk. Otherwise, they become takeover targets. Thirdly, there is no antitrust violation. So, Mr. Chair, I thank you for this opportunity and want to ask for unanimous consent to introduce the following documents. Exxon slides, ExxonMobil 2024 Advancing Climate Solutions. Responsible investing slides, CalPERS opposition to divestment, a BlackRock statement, Standard & Poor's shareholder rights, oil and gas growth profits, CalPERS portfolio, series disclaimer, CalPERS portfolio, and a few others. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I yield.
Without objection, at this moment I'd like to ask also unanimous consent to enter into the record the signatory statement that the members of this climate cartel signed. It's an agreement. And I asked unanimous consent to submit to the record. All right, so ordered. And I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan, for his opening
statement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. It's good to see our former colleague, the Attorney General Ellison. If you conspire to reduce the output of a good, it's called restraint of trade. And when you form a cartel to limit supply, it's restraint of trade. And more importantly, it's illegal. And it's illegal because it drives up the cost to consumers, to Americans, to the people we represent. And it sure looks like that's exactly what these three organizations are engaged in. Now, they'll say it's for a good cause. We're going to save the planet. Never mind that the cost of food's going to go up, the cost of fuel's going to go up, there's going to be less airline flights, there's going to be less cars. Never mind all that. We're saving the world. But courts have been clear, very clear. So, quote, social justifications proffered for restraint of trade do not make it any less unlawful. How does this conspiracy work? Ceres, CalPERS, and Arjuna, our witnesses today, formed this group called Climate Action 100. I'm sure the chairman talked about it already. They describe themselves as the global Navy in a war to decarbonize companies. 700 member investors, $68 trillion in assets. Those member investors are required to sign this statement and agree, as Mr. Massey just pointed out, the chairman just pointed out. They push companies that they invest in to disclose and reduce emissions, in some cases reduce the output of their product. And what do we know about these groups? Well, here's what Ceres said. This is a quote from them. Ceres' objective is to, quote, make access to finance dependent on the transition to net zero by fundamentally rewriting the rules of capital formation. Arjuna said this: U.S. is facing a second civil war led by a pro-Christian agenda. And this war will be fought by the investors who have a voice in how corporate America responds to this pro-Christian. Wow. What does this global war, this civil war, mean to consumers, to the American people? These guys get their way, what does it mean? Even though the demand for energy is on the way up, more energy demand around the world, they say fossil fuel should stay in the ground. They want to, literally, this is in there, they want to end the internal combustion engine in 10 years. They want to reduce air travel by 12%. They even want to restrict the amount of beef we consume. 1.5 hamburgers a week. Chairman Massey eats that every meal from his grass-fed beef on his farm in northern Kentucky. But oh, no. 1.5's all you're allowed a week, Thomas. Forget Mr. Massey, Mr. Chairman. They want to make it, think about this, more expensive to drive, more expensive to fly. And when you're waiting around the train station for the high-speed rail, you can order a hamburger while you're waiting, unless you've already had one that week. Less coal, less cars, less cows. They even said cows are the new coal. This is crazy. Oh, and by the way, the Democrats agree with all this. I want to play a quick clip from last Congress. One of our colleagues, when we had Chevron, BP, we had the oil and gas companies in front of us. Watch this questioning from Mr. Khanna, one of our colleagues.
Are you embarrassed as an American company that your production is going up while the European counterparts are going down?
Congressman, as we have already heard,
that's enough. I mean, we got the point. He's actually wanting oil companies to produce less oil. I thought when you're in business to do something, you kind of want to make more of the product, sell more of the product. I mean, that's what we're up against right here. That's why this hearing is so important. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for putting this together. It's important that we stop where climate action wants to take the country. I yield back.
I thank the chairman. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. We will now introduce today's witnesses. Ms. Mandy Lubber is president and CEO of Ceres. Ceres is a nonprofit organization that seeks to advance its climate, social, and governance goals through interactions with investors, companies, and policymakers. Ms. Natasha Lamb is Chief Investment Officer, Managing Partner, and Portfolio Manager at Arjuna Capital. Arjuna is an investment firm with a focus on environmental, social, and governance, ESG factors. Mr. Dan Bienvenu is the Interim Chief Investment Officer at CalPERS. CalPERS manages the pension and health benefits for more than 1.5 million California public employees. And Mr. Keith Ellison, welcome back to Congress. He's the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. He's previously served in the House of Representatives representing Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. We welcome our witnesses and thank them for appearing today. We will begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect, you may be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Please know that your written testimony will be entered into the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes. Ms. Lubber, you may begin.
Thank you. Microphone on? Great.
Yep, sounds great.
I am Mindy Lubber, the Chief Executive Officer of Ceres. Ceres is a nonprofit organization. We work with investors and with companies to make the business case for action as they address some of the greatest global financial challenges facing our world today. Challenges like climate change, water scarcity and pollution, and nature loss. These global threats pose material financial risks. They may be good environmental issues or scientific, but they also pose material financial risks to investment portfolios, to business operations, to supply chains, thus to the long-term stability of our markets and our economy. That's why our tagline has long been, sustainability is the bottom line. And our message has been heard. Today, the private sector has widely embraced the financial imperative to improve sustainability practices throughout their business operations and their supply chains, and to report on their efforts to shareholders, customers, and employees. In 2022, companies representing more than 86% of total global market capitalization disclosed sustainability-related information to their investors. And more than 10,000 companies have set climate action goals or targets, including half of the largest 2,000 global companies. Climate change is an issue that presents both serious financial risks and opportunities for investments and job creation in the rapidly emerging clean energy economy. Investors and companies are acting on climate because the business case is compelling. Let's just look at the massive costs of extreme weather to the U.S. economy, which was nearly $93 billion last year. $93 billion cost to our economy. Think about how severe drought impacts farms across the West and negatively affects the supply chains of the many companies that depend on our U.S. agricultural system. Or think about utilities which face risks in multiple dimensions. Their infrastructure is at risk from extreme weather and wildfires, and they also face other business risks if they fail to adopt cheaper, cleaner technologies. Large U.S.-based oil and gas companies have set emission reduction targets, indicating that businesses are taking these risks seriously across all sectors of our economy. And that's where Climate Action 100 Plus comes in, a global investor-led initiative where shareholders who own companies engaged with some of their largest portfolio companies on climate risk management. This is a key part of monitoring effective corporate governance for high-emitting companies. Shareholders want companies in their portfolios to thrive. And Ceres supports these engagements by serving as an educational resource for investors and companies. We share research and analysis, case studies, and industry best practices. For instance, we provide tools for benchmarking progress on companies' previously announced goals and their targets. It's important to note that Climate Action 100 investors are independent in every way. While Ceres may offer insight that they consider valuable, each investor acts separately and in the best interests of their shareholders, their beneficiaries, and their clients. Addressing climate-related risks is 100% in line with investors' fiduciary responsibility. And the companies that investors engage with in dialogue and engagements and with shareholder discussions, those companies are also independent. They can and they do say no to investors, to investors at any time they choose. That's capitalism at work, as companies and their shareholders discuss how to create and maintain long-term value of the company. The letter inviting me to this hearing referred to our work as collusion and noted it could violate U.S. antitrust law. We firmly disagree with this assertion, but at the same time, as asked, we have fully cooperated with the committee's investigation and have produced more than 90,000 pages of documents. We are proud of our work. We have nothing to hide. And as far as antitrust, while I'm not an expert on this, I can tell you that what we support is voluntary, private sector-led processes in which investors and businesses work to adapt to a changing world. This is how companies and the American economy remain profitable and competitive. Thank you for the opportunity to present Ceres' perspective. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lover. Ms. Lamb, you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Natasha Lamb, and I am the Chief Investment Officer at Arjuna Capital. Arjuna is pro-business, pro-competition, pro-democracy, and pro-investor. Arjuna Capital manages $500 million in client assets, and we have 10 employees. We are a boutique firm and a small business that I co-founded 11 years ago. I did so after hitting up against roadblocks as a woman and a mother in the finance industry so that I could create a better life for myself and my family and do my small part to create a better world for my children to inherit. I also wanted to create a better investment platform for our clients. That is, I wanted to offer our clients cutting-edge investment strategies, tools, and advice that integrates financially material risks and opportunities that Wall Street has in the past overlooked. Whether it's climate change, resource scarcity, inequality, or healthcare crises, these investment headwinds present both risk and opportunity. Ignoring the challenges can leave investors flat-footed as they face the downside risks of a changing world. And ignoring the opportunities can limit the upside potential of their portfolios. At Arjuna, we take material environmental risks into account when we make investment decisions and when we engage with companies whose stock our clients own in their portfolios. I consider myself fortunate to have been part of the first cohort of investment professionals that were formally trained to understand the materiality of sustainability factors, now nearly 20 years ago. And I consider my investment firm a leader in how to do it well. The allegations I face today are entirely unsupported by fact. To begin, we manage $500 million in client assets, yet today we're being accused of disrupting a $1.7 trillion energy industry over 3,000 times our size and the incredible lobbying, marketing, and market power that goes along with it. Second, we favor well-functioning capitalism, not collusion. Unlike oil cartels, which do wield the power to impact energy prices, we do not. We are capitalists, and we seek material public information. In fact, we seek the full potential of capitalism with more perfect information so that externalities like greenhouse gas emissions can be taken into account. Because with better information, investors know what we need to know to make the best choices. And a free market with the free exchange of ideas and information will power the innovation needed to commercialize solutions to our greatest sustainability challenges. Third, we favor positive competition. We seek to invest in the best companies we can for our clients. Those that are at a competitive advantage because they are managing material risks and opportunities well. And when companies have room for improvement, we like to let them know. And lastly, we are pro-democracy. As share owners in corporations, investors have the right to express concerns to company boards through the shareholder proposal process. And other investors have the right for the shareholder proposal to vote for the shareholder proposals they believe are in the best interests of their companies. One share, one vote. In making decisions on what shareholder proposals warrant support, the Securities and Exchange Commission encourages, quote, shareholders' ability to independently and freely express their views and ideas to one another. Since Congress's first information request in August of last year, Arjuna Capital has been fully cooperative in this investigation. We have produced all the documents requested, and I have appeared here voluntarily at the invitation of Chairman Jim Jordan. We have not engaged in any collusion. We've done nothing wrong. I stand before you today as an investment manager, mother, entrepreneur, small business owner, shareholder advocate, and capitalist who is acting in the best long-term interests of my clients. And I'm happy to answer any of the committee's questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lamb. Mr. Bienvenu, you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Massey, Ranking Member Correa, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Dan Bienvenu, and I serve as the Interim Chief Investment Officer for the California Public Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS as it's known. And I've served in this interim role for the last 9 months, and I've been a member of the CalPERS Investment Office for nearly 20 years. I'm pleased to appear before you on behalf of CalPERS, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to share our work. This morning, I'll provide an overview of CalPERS. I'll explain why we believe climate change risks are important for us to consider as investors. And finally, I'll talk about how we view climate change as an investment opportunity to maximize returns. So let me begin by saying that I'm proud of the work that CalPERS does to preserve and grow the assets entrusted to us by California's public servants. And as a fiduciary and a long-term investor, we consider many risks in our portfolio, including climate-related risks. It would be irresponsible for us to ignore factors that can fundamentally impact the long-term viability of our investments. Further, we recognize that we can't do this alone, and we're proud to participate in initiatives like Climate Action 100+ to help foster conversations with other investors and with companies about ways to improve shareholder value. This is not collusion, it's collaboration. And every proxy vote we cast and every engagement we have with a company is guided by our single North Star. That's what's in the best interest of our members and their long-term returns. To give you some background about CalPERS, we manage approximately $500 billion in assets. We're a fiduciary who provides retirement benefits to more than 2.2 million public employees. And we pay more than $31 billion a year in retirement benefits, each and every year. And more than half of that, nearly 56 cents of every dollar, comes from investment returns. And by law, we must discharge our duty of prudence and loyalty for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits for our members and beneficiaries. And this duty takes precedence over any other duty. This is why we have a long history of being an active shareholder and an advocate for good governance in corporate America. The body of research and evidence is clear that good corporate governance is good for shareholder value. Now let me turn to the topic of climate change risks. We believe that climate change represents an existential threat and one that we cannot afford to ignore as long-term investors. The consequences of inaction will be measured on the bottom line of the portfolio companies we rely on for investment returns to pay benefits. And our roadmap to addressing these risks is found in our Sustainable Investments Plan. And in this plan, we seek to minimize this risk through engaging the management and corporate boards of companies we own to encourage them to give due considerations to their greenhouse gas emissions and to how they will navigate the energy transition. We make climate change risks and opportunities part of our investment decision-making, along with the myriad other risks and opportunities as we look to navigate this $500 billion portfolio through markets. And one of the ways we do this is through partnering with other investors through organizations like Climate Action 100+. Another way is that we identify investment opportunities that can benefit from the transition to a low-carbon economy. And it's these last 2 points that I would like to expand on a bit. 6.5 years ago, a large group of global institutional investors launched a coalition committed to a set of principles in response to climate change. Today, the initiative has more than 700 investor signatories, and of the 170 focus companies, 42 are oil and gas companies. To be clear, this is engagement, not divestment. We remain invested because we believe owning these companies provides good value for our members. But we also think that we can use our voices to make them even better investments. And while this work is important, we recognize that our biggest opportunity is to invest in the future. And that's why we've committed $100 billion to invest in what we call climate solutions, namely investments that we believe are positioned to be advantaged by the transition to a low-carbon economy. We will invest in companies and strategies with the goal of leaning into underpriced opportunities and leaning away from overpriced risks. And we will invest in what is often referred to as brown to green investments. The marketplace for all of these investments is ripe with opportunity, but it's also laden with risks, which is why we keep our eye on our North Star, delivering long-term returns to pay pensions. So in closing, let me underscore that our primary fiduciary duty is to make good investments to fulfill our responsibility to our members. And we believe companies' long-term value creation for our members requires effective identification, monitoring, and management of risks and opportunities, including climate change risk. So thank you again, Chair Massey, Ranking Member Correa, and the members of the subcommittee for inviting us to participate in this hearing. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bienvenu. Attorney General Ellison, you may begin. Is your microphone on?
Yes, now we're good. Thank you, Chairman Massey, and thank you, Ranking Member Correa, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Keith Ellison, and I serve as the Minnesota Attorney General. I had the privilege and the honor of serving in the House of Representatives for 12 years, and it is really a joy to see many of you here today who I serve with and who have been serving since I left. During the time I was in Congress, I helped start the Congressional Antitrust Caucus, and today, protecting fair and competitive markets is a cornerstone of my work as the Minnesota Attorney General. This subcommittee is very important because there are numerous examples of unfair coordination, consolidation in our markets, and they are all too common. From healthcare to big tech to agriculture to concert tickets, anti-competitive behavior does real harm to Americans as reduced competition leads to stifled innovation and higher prices. It is crucial that antitrust enforcement focus on the growing and very real anti-competitive threats all around us. Our antitrust laws prohibit agreements among competitors that unfairly restrain competition in a given market. For example, when competitors agree to fix prices or divide up a market among themselves. To prove this kind of cartel activity, enforcers, like me, must prove the existence of an agreement between competing firms. However, the group of competitors choosing the same course of action is not enough to prove the existence of an agreement. Courts have long required evidence beyond parallel conduct to establish the existence of an agreement. Agreements that violate antitrust laws must also harm competition and outweigh any pro-competitive benefits. Private plaintiffs must prove that an antitrust violation caused harm to them specifically. In recent years, Some have suggested that ESG, or responsible investing that accounts for the risks of climate change or other environmental, social, or governance factors, may be illegal conspiracies under the antitrust law. Let me state this clearly. This is wrong. Antitrust law does not prohibit businesses or individuals from exercising their First Amendment right to work together to influence legislative or regulatory policy. The Supreme Court has made this principle very clear more than 60 years ago with the Noer-Pennington Doctrine, which allows companies to work together to influence public policy. Antitrust laws also do not prohibit businesses from independently choosing to take a similar course of action as a competitor. And crucially, nothing in the antitrust laws prevents businesses from accounting for climate change. The corporate sector now overwhelmingly recognizes that it is vital to consider climate change, workplace safety, corruption, among other important risk factors. Of the 250 largest global companies, 96% now issue sustainability reports. They don't do it out of ideology. They do it because it's responsible corporate governance. They don't do it out of altruism. They do it because of their responsibility to shareholders, and shareholders expect it. Similarly, investor initiatives focused on the management of risks of climate change have gained momentum. According to Morgan Stanley, 95% of institutional asset managers have integrated or are considering integrating some form of responsible investing into their portfolios. The top reason they give for doing so are the traditional market concerns of managing risk and maximizing the potential for long-term financial return. Yet, some have brought accusations that initiatives like these violate antitrust laws without producing any evidence of an agreement among competitors with anti-competitive effects in the market. As an antitrust enforcer, I consider these unsupported allegations irresponsible. Empty allegations can chill entirely legal business activity and slow vital innovation. Indeed, in light of the rapidly mounting evidence, businesses and investors should be applauded for considering the impact of climate change. As Attorney General, I also serve on the governing board of the Minnesota State Board of Investment, the SBI. The SBI is a fiduciary for roughly $140 billion in assets, serving more than 840 active and retired Minnesota public employees. At the SBI, we consider all material risks and opportunities, which include environmental, social, governance factors, and we are one of the highest performing public pension funds in America. We are proof that responsible investing and high market returns can and do go hand in hand. Institutional investors and financial professionals must continue to have the freedom to weigh the full spectrum of risk to value of their investments. Both the logic of the market and the law support their doing so. Baseless but well-funded accusations to the contrary harm America's economy and prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule with questions. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Wyoming for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Bienvenu, in your testimony, you state that, to be clear, this is engagement, not divestment. We would agree, which is why the report this committee put out yesterday came to the same conclusion. Where we disagree is that your engagement is designed to fundamentally change business and industries to the detriment of consumers in a matter which is indeed not collaboration, but collusion. CalPERS is a founding member of Climate Action 100. Is that correct?
Climate Action 100 Plus was founded by Ceres, and CalPERS was involved in its creation early on.
And CalPERS is a founding member of Climate Action 100, correct?
CalPERS is a founding member and a signatory to Climate Action 100 Plus.
And Climate Action 100 has 170 focus companies, 42 of them being oil and gas companies. Is that also correct?
Climate Action 100 Plus has 170 focus companies and 42 oil and gas companies where we come together and discuss ideas and make independent decisions on how we.
So my statement is correct. Is that right?
As I said, Climate Action 100 Plus has 170 focus companies, as I said in my opening statement, and 42 of them are oil and gas companies where we come together to discuss independent.
And one of the objectives of the Climate Action 100 is for these focus companies to reduce their emissions. Is that correct?
Climate change is something that is happening.
Would you please answer my question?
There's context to your question.
And one of the objectives of Climate Action 100 is for these focused companies to reduce their emissions. Is that correct?
Climate change is something that is happening.
Is that correct? Answer my question, please.
As I say, climate change is something that is happening.
Andrew Behar, the CEO of As You Sow, testified in his deposition that, quote, an oil and gas company could not reach net zero while continuing to produce fossil fuels, unquote. And As You Sow President Daniel Fugere testified that, quote, ultimately fossil fuel use has to be reduced, unquote. And GFAN's co-chair Mark Carney testified to the committee that, quote, more than half of the world's coal reserves need to stay in the ground in order for the world to be in line with Paris, unquote. So for the 42 oil and gas companies that Climate Action 100 focuses on, the way for them to reduce emissions would be for them to reduce their outputs. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question, please?
For the 42 oil and gas companies that Climate Action 100 focuses on, the way for them to reduce emissions would be for them to reduce their outputs. Is that correct?
What we focus on with the companies that we engage.
Why won't you answer my question?
I'm attempting to answer your question.
No,
What we
you're
focus
not. You're
on-
trying to avoid it.
What we focus on with the companies that we engage is for them to be long-term.
And to reduce their
productive.
outputs, correct?
We would never suggest that an organization that is an oil
Is
company.
CalPERS committed to pursuing policies which cuts fossil fuel outputs, even if that would increase prices on the American people?
CalPERS is focused on generating returns to pay pensions over generations.
And even if it makes it more difficult for them to put gasoline in their cars?
Again, our North Star is about producing returns to pay
That's
pensions.
not what you write, and it's not what you've testified to previously. Ms. Luber, Ceres is a co-founder and member of Climate Action 100. Is that also correct? Has Ceres and Climate Action 100 identified the ag sector, especially livestock production, as an industry which must reduce its emissions?
Microphone,
Would you turn on your
please.
microphone, please?
I believe there are some ag sector companies in that cohort.
Okay. And there's no way for the ag sector to reach net zero without reducing beef production, is there?
I don't know that that's clear. There are ways to do farming. There are ways to create energy that are less greenhouse gas emitting. I mean, many of the oil and gas companies that you were talking about, it's not about not producing, it's about creating options and transforming their technologies and capturing the oil and gas emissions.
You know, it's very interesting to me. My mother is 100 years old. She'll be 101. And the changes that she's seen in the last 100 years are absolutely mind-blowing in terms of the technological advances, the increase in life expectancy, the decrease in infant mortality rate, our overall prosperity, what we have created in this country. And there's one reason why we have seen the prosperity in the last 100 years that has never been rivaled in world history, and it's because of the commercial production of affordable energy. Every single one of you and your organizations want to destroy that. You are evil, and what you are attempting to do and the violations of law that you are engaged in is absolutely stunning. And I think it's telling that you won't answer my questions. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me ask unanimous consent to enter into the record this article stating that Biden is releasing more oil into the economy to lower gas prices for American consumers.
Without objection.
Mr. Benvenue, let me start out asking you a few yes/no questions. Do your investments include oil and gas companies?
Yes,
Is that one of your top areas, sectors of investment?
it is.
Do you include these investments because they make sense and are consistent with your fiduciary duty to make sure I can retire of what you're managing?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you oppose restrictions on your investments or forced divestitures of any specific industries?
No, we do not.
Do you invest in a good cause?
I said I'm very proud of the work that I do. Yes, I invest in a very good cause.
Do you
And it's
invest
about
to take
generating
care of
returns.
pensions?
I invest to take care of pensions and generate returns to pay pensions.
Thank you. Mr. AG, let me talk to you a little bit about antitrust. You're the chief law enforcement officer in your state, is that correct?
That's right,
And you enforce antitrust law.
vigorously.
On this board, this one right here, we have the elements of a violation of a Section 1 Sherman Antitrust Act. First, an agreement between competitors. Number 2, restraint of trade or interference with markets. Number 3, harm to competition. Mr. AG, do you agree that these are the elements of a Section 1 antitrust violation?
Yes, I do.
One needs to prove all elements in order to there be a violation of the antitrust law, correct?
That's right.
And let me start by asking you, and then the other witnesses. First, Mr. AG, to your knowledge, did any of these parties make an agreement on how to invest?
Nope.
To the other witnesses, Arjuna, Ceres, and CalPERS, did any of you enter into an agreement with any other entity on how you would invest?
No.
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 So there was no agreement. Mr. A.G. Ellison, the next 2 questions for you, sir. As an antitrust expert, is there any evidence that any of the entity's actions are consistent or constitute restraint of trade or interference with the free market?
Not in any case I've seen.
So we have no restraint of trade. And sir, is there any evidence of harm or competition, specifically harm to competition to the oil and gas industry?
None has been presented to me, and I haven't seen any.
So Mr. A.G., to sum it up, we have no agreement, we have no restraint on trade, we have no harm to competition. Mr. Chairman, it seems clear to me that there is no antitrust problem here.
I would agree.
About another minute and a half? Yep. Questions for Ceres and CalPERS. Do you tell voluntary members of any of these organizations that you co-chair how to invest?
We do not.
Ms. Lamb?
No.
Do you tell any volunteer members to boycott any company or industry?
We do not.
Do you, ma'am?
No, we do not.
Do you share any information on pricing or any other confidential information with any of the voluntary members?
We do not.
No.
Do you take action against any voluntary members when they do not follow your advice?
No.
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield my time.
I thank the gentleman from California and now recognize the gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Bienvenu, how much do you invest each year on behalf of how many of your members?
We manage a $500 billion portfolio on behalf of our 2.2 million members and beneficiaries.
And you've highlighted your principal responsibility is return for those beneficiaries, right?
Correct. Everything that we do every day is about generating returns to pay benefits.
And you've
over
worked there
generations.
20 years. You've been the principal deputy since 2020, right?
I was named the Deputy Chief Investment Officer in August of 2020, or I'm sorry, in April of 2020.
Okay, great. And so I think there's some parallels between what's going on with ESG and DEI. You don't deny that CalPERS has a DEI agenda, right?
CalPERS is all about generating returns to pay benefits, and every topic that we approach is through that lens.
Well, does DEI improve the returns to your investors?
I think part of good governance of a company is having diverse perspectives brought to bear as they manage that company, and I feel strongly about that for the investment team that I lead also. We want diverse
Terrific.
perspectives.
And what is the evidence that you rely on for the belief that the DEI agenda will produce better returns? Is there any study, report, analysis?
You know, as an investor, I read research reports constantly. I probably read 5, 6, 8 of them a day. So over the course of my career, that's probably been thousands.
I know, I'm just
research
wondering, is
reports.
there one that kind of sticks out in your mind? You can say, Congressman, I'm here to do good by these 2.2 million beneficiaries, and my embrace of DEI, this is what I can point to as the evidence that's helping them.
Every data-based study can tell lots of different things, and every data works that way. That's the way investing works. And remember that when we're focused on investing, we're focused on how we
Mr. Bienvenu, you can either cite a study or you can't. You can't, right? Okay.
in the thousands of studies that I
Just
have
name one.
gone
Okay,
through,
well, here's
can't
what
cite
I
a single.
found a study that actually CalPERS did. You guys did this study. It's entitled Emerging Diverse Manager Data Report. And I'm citing from the I'm citing from the 6th page of report where it says, since inception, current diverse managers generally underperformed non-diverse managers in the asset class in the policy benchmark. Are you familiar with this report?
Can I see a copy of that study, please?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Emerging Diverse Manager Report published by CalPERS.
Without objection.
I'm not able to show it to you now, but you don't have any basis to disagree with the agency you've been a part of leading, saying that the DEI hires aren't doing as well as the non-DEI hires.
As I say, when we think about diversity, we think about diverse perspectives being brought to bear on investment decisions.
Right, but okay, so those are two different things, Mr. Bienvenu, because on one hand, there's provide returns for my investors. And what your own data says is that your DEI hires underperform there. And then on the other hand, you say, well, all these diverse perspectives are really important. But I worry about the market manipulation and the bullying, because as I review what CalPERS has put out under its own investment guidelines, you brag about the fact that you voted against 768 directors at the companies you invest in most recently, and then in the prior year, you'd only voted against 133 directors. So is CalPERS voting against people as directors for companies based on their skin color?
We take up every vote independently based on the merits of the vote itself.
Right, but do you ever consider like someone's skin color? Because it's pretty immutable. People don't choose to be white or black or Asian. They just are.
We choose based on what will make the best oversight.
You're under
for
oath
that
here,
company.
Mr. Bienvenu. Can you deny under oath that CalPERS is voting against directors based on the color of their skin?
I can tell you we make every vote based on what will make that the best board for oversight of that company.
Right, but the best board is actually not doing so well. So, Mr. Chairman, let's look at the scorecard. In the state of Florida, where we aren't pushing ESG and DEI, the Florida retirement system is netting a 7.5% notch for the fiscal year. May I enter that into the record?
Without objection.
And CalPERS reports only 5.8% for 2022 to 2023. Can I enter that into the record as well?
Without objection.
So you're not performing as well. Your own data says that your DEI hires aren't performing as well. And you were there for 20 years, and you applied twice for the chief investment position, and you were passed over for that position twice, and you said you weren't going to apply for it the third time because you'd been passed over twice, and I guess they've hired an immigrant to do that job instead. Do you think that maybe you were passed over for some of these DEI reasons?
CalPERS hiring decisions is their own hiring decisions, and I'm not really a part of that, candidly.
Clearly you aren't, and I think we all know why. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Wyoming seek recognition?
I just ask for unanimous consent to submit 2 articles into the record. Moral high ground, the left's so-called morally superior policies kill millions and impoverish billions, and a Hawaii 5 power outages in paradise, how Hawaii's mandated energy transition set the table for rolling blackouts.
Without objection, the chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Nadler, for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. Mr. Chairman, everything the American people need to know about today's hearing took place at a July 2022 meeting of the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, the corporate group that arranges meetings between Republican state legislators and lobbyists to push extreme right-wing policies in all 50 states. It has been reported that this meeting featured a presentation from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, or TTPF, a climate-denying activist group that has received funding from fossil fuel companies and the Koch brothers network. The TPPF representative told the conference that his group was working with a committee of the Texas State Legislature to subpoena a, quote, truckload of documents from financial institutions involved in sustainable investment initiatives. Their goal was to find evidence that the companies had violated the antitrust laws. The Republican majority on this committee answered the call and followed the exact same playbook in its own investigation of sustainable investment. 1, accuse businesses of antitrust violations. 2, subpoena them for as many documents as possible, and 3, desperately search for facts to support a predetermined conclusion. The majority has spent 18 months bullying more than a dozen parties over their investment practices. These include financial institutions, both large and small, nonprofits, and the public pension fund. They've received more than 2.5 million pages of documents and grilled witnesses for over 20 hours. And what has been the result? Not only does all this evidence fail to show an antitrust violation, it shows just how absurd the majority's theories are. Here are the facts. First, participants in sustainable investment initiatives are independent. They do not coordinate their activities. Second, these sustainable investment initiatives do not involve price fixing, boycotts, or divestment at all. Third, these initiatives are good for competition. Unlike the Republicans, businesses and investors recognize that climate change is real and they need to plan for it. Sustainable investing is good for companies. Given these facts, no serious antitrust enforcer would bring a case against these investment initiatives. But that's not what this investigation is really about. It's really about a shadow campaign by the far right and their allies in the oil and gas industry to inject their crusade against sensible climate policy into corporate boardrooms. Multiple independent studies have shown that politically motivated restrictions on investment raise borrowing costs for local governments and saddle taxpayers with unnecessary fees. These misguided policies are also projected to reduce returns for state pension funds, threatening the retirement savings of teachers, firefighters, and other dedicated public servants. The majority would undoubtedly impose these same policies on the whole nation if they ever got the chance, passing on the cost to the American people. For now, they are content to abuse the committee's oversight powers on a shameful partisan fishing expedition, knowing that the investigation will scare businesses and investors away from these lawful and pro-competitive initiatives. For the sake of our economy and our climate, we should all hope that they do not succeed. I thank our witnesses for appearing at today's hearing, and I regret that they have had their reputations dragged through the mud by the majority's entirely unfounded accusations. Attorney General Ellison, I also want to welcome you back to the Judiciary Committee, and I want to ask you, in your view, can dark money groups making baseless antitrust allegations have a chilling effect on legitimate business and investment activity?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I think that is the effect of this proceeding today, to intimidate companies that are trying to improve returns, reduce risk from doing so in favor of a specific industry that clearly has come together to try to weaponize Congress in order to help lock America into their product and to try to stifle innovation in new other forms of energy that are more amenable to sustainability.
Thank you. This coordinated dark money campaign against responsible investment has seen great success in convincing state legislatures to pass laws injecting politics into investment decisions. In the 2023 legislative season alone, at least 14 states approved new limits on responsible investment. Mr. Ellison, what effect would state policies blacklisting firms from state businesses over their climate commitments have on the citizens of your state?
Well, if I understand your question, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that at the SBI, we're trying to have more options, more choice, more ways to make good decisions for the beneficiaries of our pension fund. And any kind of promotion of ideas that would restrict us from considering what's in the best interest of the people who benefit from our public pension fund would be adverse to the best interest of the people in our state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two UC requests. The majority here seems to be concerned about a cartel. The Biden FTC actually found evidence of a cartel, but in oil and gas. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a joint letter from Democratic members of this subcommittee urging the DOJ to investigate oil and gas collusion after the FTC found evidence of their price-fixing schemes. If the Republicans are so concerned about collusion here, which we have shown is not apparent, why aren't they sending letters about the supposed collusion to our antitrust enforcers or state AGs?
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a McKinsey Diversity Matters report, which says that companies committed to diversity show, quote, a 39% increased likelihood of outperformance for those in the top quartile of ethnic representation versus the bottom quartile. The penalties for low diversity on executive teams are also intensifying. Companies with representation of women exceeding 30% and thus in the top quartile are significantly more likely to financially outperform those with 30% or fewer, unquote. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
I thank you. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ellison, you've opined that you see no antitrust violation here. Have your fellow state attorneys general, some of them expressed the opposite opinion?
Some of them have.
Thanks, sir. You said that you drew this distinction between there being an agreement in restraint of trade or concert of action without an agreement. Let me ask this of another witness, one of the participants in the Climate Action 100 Plus. There's something I understand called a signatory handbook. Is that right, Mr. Bienvenu?
I'm not sure about a signatory handbook, but there are signatories.
There are signatories. You're aware there's signatories. Ms. Luber, right? There's signatories as a signatory handbook, isn't there?
There is a
Microphone, please.
Turn your microphone on, please, ma'am.
Sorry.
And so, look, in my long experience practicing law before I entered the public sector, signing something generally signified something. What do you understand signing to mean, Mr. Bienvenu?
As I understand it, one of the critical things at signing, it says that every decision that has been made and will be made is independently made. It is made in the best interests of those investors, whether that's investment decisions, proxy voting decisions, engagement decisions.
Signing, let me put it more simply, does signing indicate agreement?
No, it indicates that every investor will look at the financial implications of climate risk.
So they're signing to say they're not agreeing to anything, they're just, they're agreeing not to agree?
No,
is that what the signature's
they
about?
are agreeing to address and look at the financial risks and implication of climate change, whether it's the $93 billion cost to our global economy, to our U.S. economy last year, to look at it.
Ms. Luber, do you understand that agreements to restrain trade are unlawful?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Including an agreement to exert combined economic power to suppress output or increase prices. That's a cartel, right?
And that is absolutely not what Climate Action 100.
So your signers, your signatories are not agreeing to do that, right?
They are not agreeing. They are agreeing to look at climate risk. And each of them says, and the disclaimers in every piece of the material.
Do you seek output reductions of fossil fuels? You do not.
No, the first discussions that have taken place, number one, are disclosure of information. Our market does better when they understand that the insurance industry is pulling out many of our most important states.
Yes, ma'am. No, if we could just answer my questions for me. I understand the Climate Action 100 Plus was designed to harness the collective influence of those signers. Is that right?
To consider climate risk. Not to, each investor has said.
Just to consider it, not to pressure anybody?
That's right. Each investor votes their own shares, has their own conversations, and needs to. I'm sure CalPERS has 100 staff that are advising their investment office. They are looking at independently, and they are not looking at what somebody else does.
According to the Climate Action 100 Plus work plan, what I read is that Climate Action 100 Plus was, quote, designed to harness the collective influence of its investor members in order to spur companies on the Climate Action 100 focus list of 170 disfavored companies to accelerate their emissions reductions. Is that right?
If there's a financial risk to those emissions reductions, that's right. Everything about the analysis of companies and investors is about, is there a financial risk?
So, okay, but it further says that the initiative's goal is for, quote, all companies on the focus list to have committed to net zero or gone out of business as investors are no longer providing them with capital.
Yeah,
that sounds coercive to me. Does it sound coercive to you?
It does not sound coercive.
You ever heard the phrase in the movies, it's a nice little business to be ashamed if something were to happen to it? Isn't that kind of the same thing?
In fact, it is the opposite. The requests of the investors of companies is more disclosure, is adequate, appropriate information for consumers, for people investing.
How many companies have left the Climate Action 100 Plus in the past 6 months?
I'm sorry, how many companies?
How many companies have left?
I believe about a dozen. I don't have the exact number.
Ms. Lamb, you wrote an update to your investors on January 2021, didn't you? It says, the 117th Congress is the most diverse yet. Equality is on the investor and corporate agenda, and the Black Lives Matter movement defined 2020 alongside a global pandemic. And here we are facing a second civil war, this one cultural, led by a pro-white, pro-Christian agenda. In other words, make America great again. Did you write those words?
That was a newsletter I wrote following the violent insurrection on the Capitol.
Do you think we're facing a civil war?
The context of that writing was around culture.
Do you think we're facing a civil war, ma'am? Will you answer that question?
From my perspective, we are pro-equality, pro-diversity, pro-religious freedom.
So you won't answer my question whether you think we're facing.
I'm sorry, what I was describing in that piece,
I'll ask you one more time, ma'am.
reacting to the current events, was around culture.
Do you think we're facing a civil war?
I don't think we're facing a civil war.
Thank you, ma'am. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know that many industries across our economy are dominated by a few big players, and as we've seen in recent years, some of these dominant firms have used their size to raise prices and reap record returns, whether in the oil and gas industry, groceries, medical care owned by private equity firms. And I've been encouraged by the enduring bipartisan support on this committee to pursue antitrust reforms to address those anti-competitive influences. But instead of focusing on those reforms to promote competition, we have a hearing here where, once again, Republicans are wasting the committee's time and taxpayer dollars on their culture war against climate change and targeting responsible investing. Let's be clear about what's going on here. As we've heard, there is no illegal collusion by these investors. It's just a made-up controversy so our colleagues across the aisle can complain about climate change. We know that House Republicans are for free markets until you invest in something they don't like. They support personal freedoms until you do something they don't like. They support free speech until you say something they don't like. And they support law and order until you arrest or convict someone that they do like. So the plain truth here is that climate change is real. Fund managers have proven over and over that ESG factors are part of prudent investment decisions. They help to maximize returns and minimize risk. And right now, climate change is having a material impact on insurance markets, and insurance have to revamp their risk models. I don't think anyone has ever accused actuaries of being woke, until today perhaps. But as we're seeing, climate change is starting to impact nearly every major sector of our economy. And because of real climate change risks and the damage that they bring, it's become difficult and expensive to get new home insurance plans in Florida and California. When people save for retirement or to start a family or send a kid to school, they're thinking far into the future. They're saving for 10, 20, 30, 40 years into the future. And the same thing goes for our large institutional investors, retirement funds and pension funds, who have to provide future benefits and make responsible decisions, considering all of the factors for their investors and retirees. So it's not just reasonable, it's necessary that people want to consider climate risk when making these savings decisions. Mr. Benvenu, CalPERS is responsible for pension benefits for over 1.5 million Californians, right?
That is correct, 2.2 million members and beneficiaries.
Okay. And do you have any sense of how many of the retirement plan participants will start receiving benefits after 2050, one of our climate change goals?
Well, frankly, we believe that we're going to be paying pensions for out to 2050, out to 2100 and beyond. We're a perpetuity that manages pensions for the current retirees, for people like myself that are current active members, and then people like, you know, my daughter's friend just joined the fire department, and when he retires, it'll be after 2050, but when he retires, we'll be paying his pension also.
Okay. Can you, like in plain English, give a little bit of an explanation about how climate risks can pose a threat to future retirees?
I mean, I think corporate history is littered with places where companies have taken short-term looks at generating short-term profits at the expense of long-term risks, whether that was legal risk, whether that was externalities, you name it. That has happened throughout corporate history. And we want to make sure that the companies that we invest in are not only focused on generating profits today, in this quarter, those pay our pensions now, but also in generating profits in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years, because that aligns with our liabilities, which are intergenerational.
Okay. Attorney General Ellison, given the significant and material climate risks to savings and retirement, should fiduciaries take climate risk into account when making investments on behalf of future retirees?
I think it's the only responsible way to discharge fiduciary responsibility. And I can assure you that it's the floods, it's the wildfires, it's the drought that are informing me and my fellow fiduciaries on the SBI board, not anything else.
We've heard accusations that initiatives to address climate change risks in investing somehow violate antitrust laws. You've looked at this, you've enforced antitrust things. Have you seen any actual evidence of antitrust violations in these responsible, sustainable investment initiatives?
You know, Congresswoman, I see antitrust violations in a whole range of American life, but not here. You know, this committee is so important, and I wish that we could talk about real antitrust threats, but not in this area.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request. Our Republican colleagues still seem a little confused about what an agreement means under antitrust law, so I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the first page of the Climate Action 100 signatory handbook, which says Climate Action 100 Plus does not require or seek collective decision-making or action with respect to acquiring, holding, disposing, and/or voting of securities. Signatories are independent fiduciaries responsible for their own investment and voting decisions and must always act completely independently to set their own strategies, policies, and practices based on their own best interests.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
Generally yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Ms. Luber, in your 2022 annual report, you boasted that one of your key impacts for the year was being able to claim $62 trillion in assets under management by your members. That's a significant share of the investment market. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Ceres has signed the Net Zero Asset Managers Agreement. By signing on to that effort, your company has agreed to coordinate with over 300 other financial institutions to accelerate the transition towards global net zero emissions. Would you say that Ceres and its investor networks work together towards this shared goal?
We share information. Every asset manager who's part of the Net Zero Asset Manager enterprise.
And you do that through...
has their own goals. They're all different, and they all do it independently.
But you do that through communication with institutional investors, proxy advisor firms, other shareholders, correct?
We share information.
So in other words, you collaborate with members of your investor network, correct?
Collaborate by some definition, yes, not as it's been leading to meaning something else. We work with a number of investors who look for information, background facts on the financial implications of climate change.
But you're aware that collaboration to reduce, and you just said limited collaboration, whatever it might be, the reduced production isn't a violation of antitrust law.
Yeah, this is...
Why is this different?
We are not making decisions for anyone. We are not bringing people together to make joint decisions. We are sharing information on the financial risk of climate, whether it's $95 billion to the U.S. economy, to the insurance sector. That's our role. That is not...
Are there repercussions for signatories who fail to abide by their commitments?
No, there are not.
So according to this committee's interim staff report, if a company like BlackRock were not living up to its commitments, asset owners could decide to move their money elsewhere to be managed, which could mean billions of dollars in lost revenue to BlackRock.
Well, the only thing I've seen along those lines is the state of Texas pulling billions of dollars out of BlackRock, who's managing their funds, which is having a negative impact on the taxpayers of Texas. We have not caused...
So what you're saying is, has Ceres or any of its affiliates taken any retaliatory action against a signatory for failure to abide by the commitment?
Emphatically no.
Ms. Lamb, Arjuna publicly advertises divestments from oil and gas, the firearms industry, and other industries it deems controversial. Arjuna has also joined initiatives that pressure companies and clients to align with its values. For example, Arjuna previously submitted a shareholder proposal to Exxon asking them to accelerate the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and to disclose new plans, targets, timetables for their reductions. Is that correct?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and counsel for the minority regarding the fact I will not be answering questions about the litigation between Arjuna Capital and Exxon.
So when you ask that they accelerate the reduction of CHG emissions, you're asking them to reduce production of oil and gas, isn't that correct?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and counsel for the minority regarding the fact
I'm not sure how answering these questions could get you in any hot water. When you say that Exxon should shrink, do you stand by that statement? You want Exxon to be a smaller corporation?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and the minority regarding the fact I will not be answering questions about the litigation between Arjuna Capital and Exxon. As previously stated and on advice of counsel, I'm unable to answer any questions related to the litigation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Very good. I'll take that as a yes. Mr. Benenfu, Climate Action 100 Plus frequently flags key shareholder proposals and management votes for its members to signal priority initiatives. Votes flagged by Climate Action 100 then typically get the attention of the foreign-owned proxy advisory duopoly of Institutional Shareholder Services, ISS, and Glass Lewis & Company, which have combined 90% market share or advised mutual funds controlling $27 trillion in assets. In 2021, a foreign entity completed a 81% majority stake acquisition of ISS. Since that acquisition, ISS has persistently used its substantial market power to push American companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with net zero goals of the Paris Agreement. Let me just ask, does CalPERS consider whether recommendations from foreign-owned proxy advisors are in the best interest, not only of shareholders, but the U.S. national security?
CalPERS considers a myriad of topics when we think about how to vote our proxies. We take that very seriously. That's a very important part of what we do every day. And we have a mosaic where we consider many, many different sources of information and then put it all together in a mosaic and make a decision on what's in the best interest of our beneficiaries and our pension. And it is only that North Star about what's in the best interest of investment returns.
Thank you. Now you back.
Gentleman yields back. The ranking members now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record a New York Times article published August 10, 2023, titled, How Climate Change Turned Lush Hawaii into a Tinderbox. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an NBC News article published August 10, 2023, titled Drought and Wind, How Maui's Wildfires Turned into Tragedy.
Without objection.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to enter the record a KUT.org article published December 23, titled Energy Officials Warn of Winter Blackout Risks in Texas and Beyond.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from California is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Trying to understand why we are here. Ms. Lubber, do you make money for the people who work with you?
Now it's on. Do I make money from people?
Do you make money for the people who work with you? Are you helping them make money? A return on their investment?
Indirectly. We certainly do an analysis of financial risks of climate change.
Ms. Lamb, do you help the people that are your clients make money?
Absolutely.
Mr. Bienvenu, do you help the people who are in your pension fund make money?
Absolutely. Over 20 and 30 years, our returns are in the 6 and 7+% range, in line with our assumed rate of return.
And Mr. Bienvenu, are you fireable? Meaning if you don't make money, can the people you work for get rid of you?
Absolutely.
Ms. Lamb, are you fireable if you don't make money?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Lubber, if you're not providing advice that helps people make money, can they get rid of you?
Absolutely.
I don't understand why we're here, because you all, for the longest time, as long as I've been alive, and I'm the son of 2 Republicans, so I've heard this in my household a lot, you're the party of free markets. You believe that Democrats regulate too much, but you've hauled these three here to tell them you don't like how they're investing in the free market. You don't like how women make decisions about their bodies, and so you're banning abortions. You don't like how families make decisions to get pregnant, so you're banning IVF. And now you don't like when businesses invest in climate projects. And by the way, it's a little bit ironic because you have done nothing, as long as I've been in Congress, to mitigate against climate chaos. You've contributed by doing nothing to make the risks higher. These folks go out and, in their own investments, mitigate against the risk, make money for the people who work for them, and now you're saying they shouldn't do that. I want to talk a little bit about CalPERS because as I was reading Mr. Bienvenu, in the 2022-2023 year, CalPERS returned 6.1%. Is that about right?
That sounds about right.
Did you know that the largest pension fund in the state of Texas is the Teacher Retirement Fund of Texas?
I believe that's right.
Do you have any idea what they returned for their pensioners with an anti-ESG approach in their investing?
Candidly, I don't. We focus on our own fund and our own liabilities, and everything that we do, our liabilities are different from others, and we focus on our fund.
3.85%. So everything is bigger in Texas except the return on their pension fund because of their anti-ESG policies. Maybe they should be listening more to you and your strategies, Mr. Bienvenu. I also want to just ask Mr. Bienvenu, because I've heard all these allegations that you all make up a climate cartel. Who are the people in your fund, Mr. Bienvenu? Like, who are the pensioners? Where do they come from?
It's the hardworking firefighters, police officers, and public servants of the state of California.
What are some of the other jobs?
It's people that work at schools, not the teachers, but the people that work at the schools.
Janitors?
Janitors,
Okay.
corrections officers, people that work at the various state departments around the organization. And by the way, I'm a pensioner.
Right. So you and firefighters and police officers and janitors and hardworking correctional officers in California and Miss Lamb, who as a woman goes into essentially, the lion's den of a male-dominated finance industry, starts her own business, and you all make up a climate cartel that's going to take down the oil companies? Am I tracking that right for my colleagues? If anyone wants to jump in here. Their lack of jumping in, I think, reflects the absurdity of the allegation. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and now recognize Mr. Van Drew for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Benvenuto, and so we just discussed that there's a lot of good, hardworking Americans that rely on you all to make sure that they get a good investment so they can educate their kids, so that they can retire when they want to, so that they maybe can go on a vacation and do the simple things in life. And I'm a simple country dentist. We got a lot of smart people up here. I hope I'm at least half as smart, but I just want to ask some simple questions. What's your job? What is your responsibility? If you were to say it to me in one sentence, what is your job?
My job is to take $500 billion and expose it to a set of investment risks across asset class to earn something like a 6.8 to 7% return over generations.
Is your job to get the maximum return on investment?
My job is to get return per unit of risk. And we're very risk focused also, but yes, return per unit of risk is critical.
To safely, let me put it in plain English, to safely get the maximum return on investment. Is that your job?
In investment terms, it's about to maximizing our Sharpe ratio, which is the highest numerator and the lesser denominator.
So if it became clear to you that for those firefighters and teachers and janitors and everyone else, that you could get maximum return on investment safely, by investing in a fossil fuel company, would you?
We are invested in fossil fuel companies. It's part of a diversified portfolio for us. So yes, anything that will generate returns to pay benefits.
Would you encourage that, though?
We are all about generating returns.
Or would you try to change the focus of that company? Would you have meetings and shareholder resolutions, et cetera, to replace boards of directors?
We want every company that we invest in to be sustainable and to generate profits now, but they must generate profits 20 years from now and 40 years from now.
If you had two companies and one of them offered a lower return of investment for those firefighters, teachers, janitors, et cetera, and one was a climate-based company, a wind turbine company, like Ørsted, for example. I don't know if are you invested in Ørsted?
I'm not sure. We own 10,000 securities across.
Okay, it's a big one. It's a big Danish company with wind turbines, but you're invested in some wind, I would imagine. Am I correct?
We are.
Okay. And you know that wind requires subsidization. You have to subsidize wind. And even with the billions upon billions of dollars of tax dollars of those firefighters, teachers, and janitors, their money going in to subsidize these foreign companies, they've been having a really tough time and not really returning on investment. Are you aware of that?
As I say, every decision that we make when we invest is about generating long-term returns to pay pensions.
So you're good, man, you're good. Seriously. I'm asking you a specific question. If you had a company that was faith-based and you could invest in that and it gave a good return, as opposed to a company that fit into more of your values, what would you do?
Every investment is about how it fits into that large 10,000 plus security portfolio and how that portfolio can generate returns to pay pensions. And every decision we make is through that lens.
So Climate Action 100 recently lost the backing of BlackRock, State Street, JP Morgan Management, and a combined total of $14 trillion. Has that departure made you be retrospective at all, introspective? Has it made you think? I mean, those are big dogs, they matter. Again, whether we love them all the time or not, you know, good return on investment. A lot of people's firefighters, teachers, janitors that you mentioned. You know, the point I want to make here is, honestly, and when I say that you're good, you're a good speaker and you're good at evading the question respectfully. The bottom line is that I think because of a social agenda that you all have, you're giving up the return on investment that you could have because you're trying to socially change the country. That's not your job. Your job is to help these people get that maximum return on investment. It isn't to change America as we know it. And climate change and the decisions that we made, that's up to the United States Congress. That's up to the House, the Senate, and the President, however you feel about it. It's not up to you all. It's not up to you to do that. I know that you think that by leveraging money, and you have a great deal of it, you can do that, but that's wrong. And if you really care about those people that my friend from California mentioned, if you really care about all those hardworking Americans who are breaking their back every day, who are relying on you for investments to do the very best you possibly can for them, you're falling short, in my opinion. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record two news articles. The first article, which was published just 3 days ago by The Guardian, titled "Far-Right Fossil Fuel Company Allies Pressure U.S. Supreme Court to Shield Firms in Unprecedented Campaign," in quotes, reports that groups linked to Leonard Leo, including the Judicial Crisis Network, Alliance for Consumers, and the Republican Attorney General's Association, are pressing the Supreme Court to intervene in lawsuits against fossil fuel companies regarding their alleged decades-long effort to sow doubt about the dangers of burning fossil fuels that could cost billions of dollars. And the second article is a Wall Street Journal piece published on February 26, 2023, titled, quote, "Conservatives have a new rallying cry, down with ESG," end quote, which explains that groups in Leonard Leo's dark money network, including Consumers Research, CRC Advisors, and Marble Freedom Trust, have also played a major role in dark money efforts to push anti-ESG messaging and legislation. And this article also contains a relevant quote from Mr. Leo, which is, "The ESG movement is polluting our culture and assaulting the dignity and worth of people. Our enterprise stands with a growing group of Americans who are fighting to crush leftist dominance in this area." I ask unanimous consent that these articles be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Along with these articles, following articles, dark money group weaponizes state treasurers in attacks. State attorneys general join anti-ESG effort. Conservatives have a new rallying cry, "Down with ESG." And far-right fossil fuel company allies pressure U.S. Supreme Court to shield firms in unprecedented campaign.
Without objection.
And also, last but not least, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record 2 reports from investigative watchdog documented.
Without objection.
Quote, state AGs join anti-ESG effort amid growing backlash, which was published July 2nd, 2023, which demonstrates that dark money and political groups are working with state attorneys generals to attack ESG investing. And a dark money group weaponizes state treasurers in attacks on climate policy.
Without objection.
Which was published August 5th, 2022, which reports that the State Financial Officers Foundation, a 501c3 organization, is a key coordinator of attacks on ESG investing by GOP state financial officers.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman.
Were those all unanimous consent requests? And does the
Yes.
gentleman need 5 minutes now?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Please put 5 minutes on the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are here because MAGA Republicans are doing the bidding of dark money groups with ties to former Trump administration officials, the oil and gas industry, and far-right donors like Leonard Leo and the Koch brothers. There is no antitrust issue here. Investors simply realized that responsible investing was good for their pocketbooks. Extreme weather events threaten corporations' assets and commercial dealings, and it is just good business to consider things climate-related risks. But that scared the oil and gas industry, and they started funneling millions and millions of dollars into preventing shareholders and companies from looking at the effects of climate change on their business. Leonard Leo of the Federalist Society called this a very high priority and said he was a part of a movement to crush, quote, crush leftist dominance in this arena, end quote. MAGA Republicans put profits over people and picked up the playbook of the industry-funded dark money groups like the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is a climate-denying nonprofit funded by the Koch brothers network and big oil companies like Exxon and Chevron. At the urging of these dark money groups, MAGA Republicans subjected any responsible investing groups to expensive and time-consuming investigations and publicly smeared them, trying to bully them to get them to scale back their responsible investing commitments. Americans cannot let dark money from the oil and gas industry chill free speech and stop us from working to protect ourselves from climate change. As I mentioned, the legal theories that Republicans are advancing in this investigation are from a paper sponsored by a dark money group called Texas Public Policy Foundation, which takes money from the Koch brothers and big oil companies like Exxon and Chevron. Attorney General Ellison, do you think that this committee should take legal theories that are funded by big oil at face value?
Absolutely not. And I can tell you that in Minnesota, we posted returns of 8.9%, and we do employ ESG principles. So in terms of success, I think your point is very well taken.
Thank you. Ms. Luber, why do you think Big Oil is so desperate to stop your work that they'll secretly fund phony legal theories and try to smear you?
Well, I can't speak for them, but it is a complicated industry that's creating a problem that's causing a financial crisis or a financial problem for every sector of the economy. Now, the fossil fuel industry, oil and gas, has been subsidized and still has extraordinary subsidies, but science is telling us that that won't last forever, that the product of those companies is creating financial, environmental, scientific problems for every sector of our economy. And so they are under the microscope, but nobody, there is no investor who we work with who says they want the company to fail. They own the company. CalPERS owns every oil and gas company. They want them to prevail, but to transition, to look at the science we're all facing and the cost to the economy of every sector, and to start transitioning away from fossil fuels or finding a way to bury the problem they're creating, of which nobody has found. I mean, but their product is creating, if you're the fashion industry and you were just told that your cotton crop had died due to climatic changes, drought, or too much water.
You would make some changes that were in the best interests of the business. And
That's
you would
right.
move forward.
So every sector has to look at what is their risk and how to start transitioning. That's what's being asked of them, not to go away, to divest immediately.
And they've got the capital to invest in the new technology of the 21st century.
They have the capital.
Renewables.
And they still have the subsidies that perhaps are not afforded to the new technologies of our future.
Amidst record profits.
Correct.
Thank you. The Republicans keep talking about a cartel. I'm not sure what that they know what that word means. Attorney General Ellison, OPEC is a cartel, right?
Absolutely it is.
And that means it controls the price and supply of oil, correct?
That's right.
Why do you think, who do you think plays a bigger role in the supply of oil and the prices Americans pay at the pump? OPEC or the folks seated at the witness table with you?
Obviously and clearly OPEC, and I believe that collusion or allegations of collusion with some oil executives with OPEC is under some investigation right now.
Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Trying to understand what goes into an ESG score. Mr. Bienvenu, are you aware that last year S&P Global gave Tesla an ESG rating of 37 out of 100, while at the same time giving Philip Morris a rating of 84 out of 100? You familiar with that?
I'm not aware of that. I will tell you that for us, ESG ratings are part of the mosaic in the investment decision that we make, because it's critical for us that we consider all of those topics.
So you would consider this in your investments, these ESG ratings?
We consider every information that we can get in our investments. More information
So shouldn't you
is better
know
for an
what's
investor.
behind the fact that Tesla got less than 40 and a tobacco company got more than 80? Would that cause you to invest in the tobacco company over an electric car company?
As I said, every investment decision we make is a mosaic of hundreds and thousands of factors.
But you're testifying today, you have no idea how Tesla got half the score that a tobacco company got?
As I
Do
said
you know what goes into these ratings?
As I said previously, we own 10,000 companies, and each one has...
Do you own Tesla or Philip Morris?
We own Tesla.
Do you have any Philip Morris?
We do not have any Philip Morris.
Okay. Well, I wish you could explain to us today why Tesla has an ESG rating of 37. Philip Morris had 84 last year. Attorney General Ellison, if 3 airline companies got together and decided, let's say the management of the airline companies, and decided to reduce flights or to get rid of their frequent flyer program, would that be collusion? Would you pursue that?
Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of things that go into any antitrust case, and so just to answer your question with only what you've asked, I'd say I need to investigate more, but just on the bare bones of what you asked, it would get our interest.
Will get your interest. What if instead of the companies, their investors did this, or a shell company that all 3 of the airlines were a part of suggested to all 3 companies that they should reduce flights?
Well, there I can't go with you because the only thing that, I mean, if you're talking about the folks assembled here and other groups that give information to companies, those companies are making independent decisions and making decisions on the interests of the people who they represent, whether they be shareholders or whether they be pension fund beneficiaries.
I'm glad in the first instance it would get your interest up because that's why we're having the hearing here. We see evidence that these group of investors has conspired, collaborated, colluded, convened, whatever you want to call it. It's still pretty much the same thing to reduce the outputs of their companies or the companies that they target. And, you know, Ms. Lover, you said that mainly what you all advocate for is disclosure, but don't you also try to get the companies to do things?
We're interested in the companies taking positions that allow them to be strong and profitable over the short, medium, and long term. And every discussion, whether it's with an auto company, looks at where's the market going as it relates to EVs, not just combustion engine vehicles.
Well, here's the problem we have. What is demand management? Does somebody want to tell me what demand management is? Because nobody jumped on that. So, you know, it's in all of your documents, demand management. It's kind of the go-to thing to reduce. When you discover that the technology isn't there yet to reduce the emissions and keep the production the same, you suggest in the documents that the companies, here's a document called Investor Actions to Align the Aviation Sector with the IEAS 1.5 degree decarbonization pathway. It suggests that the aviation companies themselves could manage demand by raising their prices. Now, the problem here is that this is coordination. You guys are putting these documents together, you're sending them to everybody, you're collaborating on the documents, and then you're going to the companies that you've invested in and saying you should do this. And we know the technology's not there, but here's some of the suggestions for the airline companies: keeping business travel to 2019 levels, capping long-haul flights for leisure at 2019 levels, reducing total flights by 12%. These are in the documents that you send to your members. And again, you call it demand management. What I would say is that if we saw anybody else doing this for any other reason, the fact that you think you have a noble reason isn't enough to get you around the law. It's not. Because what you're doing ends up raising prices, reducing production, and it's not good for society, and it's not, in many cases, not good for the firms you're investing in. And that's why we're having this hearing today. And I see that my time has expired. Attorney General Ellison, I understand you need to leave.
Unfortunately.
And I appreciate you coming. You probably never want to come back here again, I would say. But congratulations on your new job, and thank you for participating today.
May I just thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for your hospitality today, and I am always happy to help advance the legislative process in whatever way I can. So thank you very much.
We appreciate your time. And if the other witnesses will stay, that would be good, because we have a few more folks who want to ask questions. Now, let's see, we got, the gentlelady from Vermont is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. And I just want to start by saying I'm really sorry that you've had to witness some of this. It's frankly embarrassing at moments. Cue the diabolical music. Isn't it true that you believe that climate change is real? Isn't it true that you believe we should reduce our carbon footprint? It's absurd that we're even having this conversation. I represent Vermont, and a year ago, we had catastrophic flooding in Vermont that we're still digging out of. It destroyed basically every small business in the downtown of our capital. From one end of the state to another, we are still dealing with claims to FEMA, still dealing with insurance claims. And I can tell you, it really doesn't matter whether you're talking to a Democrat or Republican. Vermonters know climate change is real, and we are feeling it in all of our downtowns because the water runs downward. And even small rain storms turn into catastrophic flooding for us, and it's happening more and more. So again, I'm sorry that you have to sit through this. I want to turn to another issue that I think is incredibly important that I don't want to get lost here, which is we talked about pensions. And so I receive a pension in Vermont. Before I was a lawmaker, I was a public school teacher. And I understand really well that many teachers dedicate their entire lives to the future. And I always say, as a middle school teacher, you can't teach middle school unless you believe in the possibility of change and you believe that there is possibility and promise on the horizon. So as teachers, we're focused towards the future. And it's only logical that we would want our investments to be focused on that same thing, stability for the future, so that when we retire, there will actually be a floor, essentially, so that we can live lives of dignity in retirement. And this topic is so important because it goes directly to the heart of it, which is, will hardworking people have the money that they need to retire with dignity? And we're talking about long-term sustainability. As we talked about, earlier, it's teachers, it's janitors, it's all of our frontline workers. And if Congress doesn't allow money managers to make responsible investments now, then we'll see a poorer and darker future for all of those people. And so, it's absurd that we sit here, you are here as responsible investment managers, right? And your job is to make sure that you evaluate risk on behalf of your client. That's why they hire you. That's why they invest their money there. Nobody is forcing them to do this. This is where the market has led us. If a firm wants to attract investment by demanding that it's thinking about demonstrating that it's thinking about the future, the next quarter century, not just the next quarter, we should respect that. We should be supporting that, right? We should get the hell out of the way, honestly, and not drag you before Congress for this ridiculousness here. As has been mentioned before, my Republican colleagues, who are usually so in favor of letting market forces work, would second guess the investment decisions that you're making because they don't align with their worldview. So they've constructed, once again, a dynamic involving a culture war conspiracy theory around investing, responsible investing. We talked about the returns. You're getting great returns. Isn't that what we're supposed to be talking about here? Investing responsibly so people can live with a life of dignity later on. So what are we doing here? We're wasting time, once again, in this committee, not talking about the issues that absolutely impact working people day in and day out. So I just want to go back to basics here. Let's go to each witness here. Let's get at the heart of it. This entire hearing is premised on the idea that responsible investment initiatives somehow require companies to make investment decisions that are in violation of antitrust laws. So, to each of you, do responsible investing initiatives include binding agreements between companies to make certain investment decisions? Yes or no? We'll start with Mr. Bienvenu.
On behalf of CalPERS, we make every decision independently, and it's about generating returns to pay pensions consistent with our fiduciary duty.
Ms. Lamb?
Can you repeat the question?
I want to know, do responsible investing initiatives include binding agreements between companies to make certain investment decisions?
Absolutely not.
Ms. Lober?
Absolutely not.
So again, what are we doing here? I sit in here day in and day out, and I wonder, who's standing up for the little guy? Who's standing up for the little guy? Mr. Chair, before I yield back, I would like to introduce for the record the report of the Democratic staff of the House Judiciary Committee on this investigation, which, unlike the Republican staff report, contains an antitrust legal analysis section reviewing the evidence and concluding that no antitrust violations have been proven here. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection. The gentleman from California is recognized for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a page from Delta's 2024 annual report that says that climate change affects the airline's business.
Without objection. Now recognize the gentleman from Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what we just heard and what we've heard from Democrats and what we've heard from the left almost consistently is that the ends justify the means. You know, the climate is a problem, so we're going to overlook anti-competitive, collusive behavior. We need to get a good return on pensions, so we're going to ignore evidence of violations of antitrust law. You know, the laws are here for a reason, and everyone is obligated to follow it. Just because you may think yourself to be higher-minded in your pursuit of profits doesn't give you the right to ignore the laws. So I want to ask Ms. Lubber, because we've been trying to get information from your organization, and we've been trying, at first, we requested voluntary cooperation 18 months ago in producing responsive information relating to your potentially collusive work to promote ESG-related goals. You failed to cooperate voluntarily. We were forced to issue a subpoena to Ceres in June of 2023. In October of 2023, you were informed that you had failed to produce responsive information from the Ceres Investor Portal, an internal website that contains responsive information and communications related to the climate cartel's engagement with American corporations and other collusive activity. To date, you still have produced just 3 spreadsheets of data exported from the Ceres Investor Portal, and that information was provided in an unusable format. So as the chairman of the subcommittee on responsiveness and accountability to oversight, we have been having hearing after hearing on the failure of this administration and of organizations like yours, and failure to respond to our efforts to ensure oversight on behalf, on behalf of the law, quite frankly. So the subpoena back in June of 2023, you recall that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you understand that the subpoena imposes mandatory legal obligations upon you and Ceres, correct?
Correct.
And you understand that failure to comply with a congressional subpoena can be punished with criminal contempt of Congress, correct?
Correct.
All right, the subpoena required you to produce all the responsive information demanded by it, didn't it?
Correct.
Okay. And are you aware that back in October of 2023 regarding the portal, some 4 months after the subpoena, your counsel claimed that they were not familiar with it?
I'm not aware of that. What I will say in response to what you said is we have turned over 90,000 pages of documents.
3 spreadsheets.
We've asked, over a period of time over the last year, we've asked for direction on how to narrow the subject matter that wasn't forthcoming, and we continue to turn over documents. As it relates to the spreadsheet you're talking about, which I'm not sure I've seen, but I believe I've heard about, that spreadsheet has hundreds and hundreds of documents noted on it, and we've asked the committee to give us more guidelines on which ones to turn over. Every document that's been asked for, we have turned over. I truly believe that is a formatting question, and clearly this Congress has bigger values than formatting, but we will go back to it. Our lawyers will talk to your lawyers. I believe we've turned over 90,000 plus pages, more than almost anyone, in response and in compliance with your requests.
Okay, we've asked for full access to the portal. Why have we not received that?
I actually have no idea.
Okay, can you commit to making the portal available to the committee today?
I will commit to trying to figure out why it is or why it's not. What you do have, documents were requested, and those 3 pages with hundreds of notations and documents were included, and I believe you've got what you've asked for.
Okay, but we need, if the committee needs to work with you to get access to the portal, can you provide us with that access?
Our lawyers and staff will be talking to your staff immediately, as we have every single day or every single week over the last 15 months.
Okay, you haven't certified compliance. Can you tell us why not?
I'm sorry, certified compliance?
Well, with the requests for information.
That surprises me. I believe we have. We'll double check that, but if it's the form that we were asked to sign and check before this hearing, that's been done, and I hope we could both double check at both of our ends whether that form was listed. I am certain we have filed that.
holding people in contempt is something that this Congress is prepared to do. In fact, we're going to do that today with our Attorney General. And we would not want to have to do that with you as well. So
I am an honorable citizen lawyer advocate, and we were asked to file a form before the hearing. I am certain we did. If there was some way it wasn't transmitted properly, please let us know and we'll get it to you.
thank you. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I now recognize myself to seek unanimous consent to submit for the record a document produced by Climate Action 100 Plus. And at the top of it, it says investor actions to align the aviation sector with the IEA 1.5 degree Celsius decarbonization pathway. And it talks about limiting flights and demand management. And with that, I recognize Mr. Ivey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the panel. I'm sorry I've been gone for so much of the hearing. We've had parallel hearings and floor action and other things going on. But I did catch a little bit of it, and one of the things I caught was one of my Republican colleagues calling you evil, which I think is astonishing, frankly. As we were trying to prepare for this hearing, and it's the antitrust subcommittee, I mean, one of the things I was trying to figure out was, what's the antitrust issue? And I caught the Attorney General's testimony at the questioning of Mr. Correa, and I think it's very clear there's no antitrust violation here whatsoever. In fact, I don't even think there's a whiff of it, to tell you the truth. So I'm a little surprised that we're focusing the attention on it in this way. And I gotta say too, the point that you all were just covering, I'm sorry my colleague left, because I'm on the subcommittee for this committee that's doing the same thing with respect to the federal government, which is complaining about not getting documents. 90,000 pages is an astonishing amount of document production for a private company. And I don't know how many of my colleagues have been in private practice and worked with a private company in response to subpoenas, but a subpoena of that magnitude, I think you could actually challenge it in court potentially as unduly oppressive. Now, you've got attorneys, y'all do what you follow their guidance and everything, but one of the issues that we haven't ironed out here in the committee with respect to the committee's subpoenas to the administration is they kind of struggle with the communications between their staff and the lawyers who are working on these productions. And I think what I heard from you was that your attorneys had asked for direction to the staff and hadn't really gotten what you needed on that. And we have, I'm saying we, but it really is my Republican colleagues, sent out really overbroad document requests, as subpoenas in some instances, that I think before you go to contempt, you should take it to court, which is the normal process. I think you'd lose in court. If the subpoena for this one looked like the other ones.
Would the gentleman yield?
I would.
Just from a standpoint of having been down this road, we can't go to court without a vote of the whole House. That's what gives us standing to do it. But we would look forward to doing that.
That'll be up to you all. You know, I think it's, as I said, with respect to the administration and the Attorney General in particular, I think it's been a clear abuse of authority to seek contempt for the tape that you're after there. But I don't want to digress. On this particular point, I want to say this. The climate change issue, and I know my Republican colleagues are, many of them anyway, somewhat in denial with respect to the fact that there is climate change and that the science supports that. But I do think that the effects are undeniable. And so some of the things that I've noticed, like for example in Florida, people who own houses along some parts of the coast can no longer get insurance for their houses because of the effects of climate. And insurance companies have to internalize those costs because they have a fiduciary responsibility of their own, as do you, to pay attention to that, because if you don't, you're paying for houses that you can't afford to pay for because the climate changes are having such a big impact and such frequency of impact that you'd lose money. So the insurance companies are starting to walk away. What that's going to turn into is individual homeowners who can't get home insurance then looking to the state for help to, once they get hit by another one of these hurricanes, for support The states aren't going to want to do it. Mr. DeSantis isn't going to want to do that. So guess what he's going to do? He's going to come to the federal government and ask for a bailout there too. And that's happening in other places. You know, my colleague from North Carolina, I saw that, I think it's on the Outer Banks. They've had, I believe, 6 houses. I believe these are the beachfront mansions that are falling into the ocean because of the rising sea levels. They're going to start having trouble insuring those properties as well. So we can pretend like there's no issue there, but I think it's pretty clear from the effects that that's obviously the case. And from the standpoint of your fiduciary obligations to your investors and to the people who, from your pension, for example, there's no way that you can ignore that responsibly. You have to pay attention to it. You have to incorporate it into the work that you do. And it's shocking to me that you're being beaten up for doing that. And by the way, I think I'm running out of time, but thanks again for coming. I apologize for what I think I would call them cheap shots that have been taken at you today. And I appreciate the fact that you've tried to comply. I also appreciate the fact that there's zero evidence of an antitrust violation that I've heard, and the Attorney General pointed that out. And I encourage you to keep up the work that you're doing, because I think it's not only in your pensioners' best interest and your investors' best interest, but I think it's in the country's best interest. And with that, I yield back.
I recognize the chairman of the full committee for 5 minutes.
To reduce emissions, do you have to reduce production, Mr. Benvenu?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
To reduce emissions, do you have to reduce production? I mean, you guys said Climate Action 100, you're all part of this group. You said your goal is to reduce carbon emissions, and you got this focus list, 170 companies that you're targeting to change how they do things. And you said of that 170, 1/4 of them are oil and gas companies. 42 are oil and gas companies. And what I want to know is, in order to reduce carbon emissions, do those 42 companies, oil and gas companies, on the target list, on the focus list, do they have to reduce production?
I don't think anybody knows how the climate transition is going to take place.
That's not what I ask you. Do they have to reduce production or not? They're in the business of making oil and gas, producing oil and gas. And I'm asking you, do they have to stop or lower, decrease oil and gas production?
As I say, I don't think anybody knows how the climate
Ms.
transition...
Lamb, what do you think?
I think that the oil and gas industry is facing enormous headwinds because of global emissions going up so much. And so I think that those companies are challenged and are going to have
I didn't ask if they were challenged. I didn't ask about headwinds. I asked a simple question. Do you think they have to reduce production of oil and gas?
I think each company needs to take a look at their business model and figure out how
So you don't think that
they're going to
they can increase production? You're okay with that?
I think that each oil and gas
If a company making their product wants to make more of the product, are you okay with that?
I think that the product of oil and gas companies is energy, and they can look and see how they can best produce energy for their customers.
So what do you mean? When you got 42 oil and gas companies on your focus list and you want to reduce carbon emissions, are oil and gas companies going to be allowed to encouraged, engage, whatever term you want to use? Are they going to be able to make more oil and gas or less oil and gas? What do you think they should do?
Oil and gas companies can do whatever they want because...
Well, then why are they on your focus list? What are you trying to get them to do?
As investors that consider the financial risks...
Ms. Luber, will you answer the question, because the other two folks won't? Do you think
Yes.
oil and gas companies should be able to make more oil and gas, or do they have to make less?
They don't necessarily have to make less. Let me give you
So
an
do you guys all
example.
disagree with Mr. Khanna?
No.
I played Mr. Khanna's clip. Congressman Ro Khanna said to the CEO of Chevron, are you embarrassed? I'll read it. Are you embarrassed that as an American company, your production is going up? Should they be embarrassed because they're producing more? Should an oil and gas company be embarrassed because they're producing more oil and gas?
So oil and gas companies should limit their greenhouse gas emissions. That doesn't immediately mean they produce less. Oil and gas companies...
So it means later they produce less?
No, what it means is they
Are you disagreeing? Here's the question. Are you disagreeing with Mr. Congressman Khanna, or are you agreeing with him?
Please repeat what he said.
He said to the CEO of Chevron, are you embarrassed as an American company that you're producing, that your production's going up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Obviously wanting the production to go down.
Context. I do know
That's the
that oil and
context.
gas-
He went through all of them. All of them said, will you pledge to reduce production? I'm just asking you guys, as the guys who have 42 oil and gas companies on your target list, is it okay for oil and gas companies to actually increase oil and gas production.
If they could decrease their emissions in the process, I think they would be looked at differently. Regardless, so many of the oil and gas companies have decreased their methane emissions.
Anybody recently leave Climate Action 100? Any of your investment members, your member investors, anyone recently leave Climate Action 100?
About a dozen.
About a dozen? Can you
Yep.
name some of those companies?
Sure.
Small companies, big investors, small investors, who were they?
Some combination, but I would argue more, and there were some household names. I would also
Some big ones, weren't there?
Yep, BlackRock.
BlackRock's pretty big.
Morgan.
JP Morgan, that's pretty big.
In all of those
Vanguard.
cases, Vanguard, they've said they're going
State
to
Street.
continue fighting for climate risk
PIMCO,
reduction.
right? They're some of the biggest investor and asset managers in the world. They all left your group. Why'd they leave?
Well, they all have different reasons. BlackRock is only
Well, they all left at
partially.
sort of the same time. There must be something going on here.
They've heard a lot, they've got a lot of pressure from Congress and others that they should leave. BlackRock said to us, we're going to
We're not
continue
pressuring
work.
anybody. We just want to know what you guys are up to. 42 oil and gas companies on your focus list, and you can't even tell me if you want production of oil and gas to go up or down for them.
No, what I have said was that some of them have increased production but reduced emissions. The greenhouse gas emissions that
Are you for ending the internal combustion engine in the next 10 years?
that is the direction that our government is going, and I think it's the direction that the automakers have
You agree with
determined
that?
makes sense.
Getting rid of
yes.
the internal combustion engine in 10 years.
Yes.
Are you for reducing airline flight travel by 12%?
I don't know the numbers for airline flights.
Do you want it to go down?
Not necessarily. I don't think.
What about
okay?
Well, the last question is, what about hamburgers? Where do you stand on hamburgers? Is 1.5 a week enough, or do we get more? Chairman Massey wants to know. He's got some of the best grass-fed beef I've ever had.
Freedom of diet.
What's that?
I said people should have freedom of diet.
Oh, so you don't agree with that?
Well, in all cases, there are other ways to fix the challenges.
Newsflash: Ceres is okay with us eating more hamburger, Chairman.
Eat what you would
Newsflash:
like.
Ceres is okay with that.
Eat what you would like.
I yield back.
Thank you. I recognize the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from the New York Times, June 7th, 2024, noting that difficulty in getting insurance thanks to climate change and dangers to affordable housing thereof, that climate change is affecting the most vulnerable in our communities.
Without objection. Now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, for 5 minutes.
I thank Chairman. The chairman of the full committee asked a fairly straightforward question, and I didn't hear an answer. So I'll go on to a different question that hopefully it will get better answers. How many in this room arrived here with a zero net emissions, zero carbon? You didn't walk without breathing. Did you fly here or drive?
I flew here from Boston.
Okay, so would you have gotten here if there was no petrochemical industry as it is today?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Lamb, how did you get here?
I took a flight at request of Congress.
Okay, so you flew using some of that evil Exxon oil or bad Chevron JP4 or whatever it was. How about you? How did we get here from California?
Yeah, Mr. S., like you, I flew here from California.
Okay, so would you all agree that today the oil and gas industry is essential to our very existence, welfare, and way of life? Today. Are any of you going to disagree with that? I'll give you the floor if you're going to say no, we could shut it off today. So knowing that it's essential today, and I'll go to CalPERS next, you've basically said you're cutting off investments, period, and encouraging others through your process to cut off investments with virtually all oil and natural gas companies, including Chevron, based right in California, correct?
We are still fully invested in the oil and gas companies that we invest in. It's part of a diversified portfolio. And for us, we won't tell companies how to navigate the energy transition.
Then why are you discouraging others from making those investments and limiting the available capital for those companies?
Every investor makes their decision.
No. I'm asking why you're making look, you're part of what has been up until now a very opaque organization that in fact leverages, pushes, prods, embarrassed, whatever term you want to use, people to not make investments in what is currently an essential part of what makes our life worth living in this country and around the world. So I asked you the question. If it's a good investment, why is it you're discouraging others?
So CalPERS is one of the most transparent pension organizations
Oh, you
in
are?
the world.
Are you invested in any lawsuits in which you are not disclosed as an investor at the time of the filing of those lawsuits?
I'm an investor, not a lawyer, so I can't speak to what.
Well, let me tell you, your organization has been actively opposing any kind of third-party litigation transparency because you do invest, at least it's been reported and we believe it to be true, you do invest in third-party litigation. In other words, suing people but not wanting your name on it. Why? Well, because it's profitable, right? And you know about the profits. So I'm going to reiterate, have you, to the best of your knowledge, received any revenue as a result of investing in litigation?
Again, I'm not an attorney, but there is
I'm not asking an attorney question. I'm asking an investor question.
There is a
Has
third-party.
CalPERS received any money by investing in what was the monies that were used or a contract which was used to create litigation on which you profited from a return if they prevailed?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, so you run investments, but you don't know if CalPERS participates. Let me ask one final question, because Mr. Massey and I have something in common, which is we spent our careers in engineering and a lot less in law. So antitrust is kind of an acquired knowledge for us. For each of you, if 2 or 3 companies were to share their prices or their strategy for pricing or how they went to market with another competitor, would that be an antitrust violation? I know you're not a lawyer.
As I've said before, I'm an investor, not a lawyer.
Ms. Lamb,
I'm not an antitrust
right, but
expert.
the basic definition that you'd have to pass the bar with is that sharing information between competitors inherently puts you in jeopardy of antitrust, particularly if that information allows effectively coordination of prices or other activities, including investment activities. Wouldn't that be true?
I really don't understand the premise of what you're saying. What we're doing, and the reason, that is we're investing our clients' capital for the long term, upholding our fiduciary duty.
Oh, you're investing for the long term. Do you sell stock on a quarterly or annual basis?
We rebalance our portfolio.
Okay, so you buy and sell regularly. So when you say long term, the reality is you both do long term and short term. And if something's a good investment today, you have a fiduciary obligation to consider it. And so I'm going to close with this, Mr. Chairman. Everyone talks about risk. There is zero risk today in investing in the oil and natural gas industry. There's zero risk because for the foreseeable future, we are going to need it and we're going to need more. Yes, we need it to be as clean as it possibly can, but the transition away from fossil fuels has been predicted for decades, and in fact, it is nowhere close. So as you say that you're making investment decisions, it is clear you're making investment decisions based on your politics and not on the best interest of national security or the welfare of the American people. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentlelady from Indiana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Benvenu, why did you join Climate Action 100? Why did your fund do that? What was the reason?
We viewed Climate Action 100 Plus as an opportunity for investors to get together and share ideas and figure out how to navigate, in our case, a $500 billion portfolio through a very uncertain future. And more information and more ideas and more discussion can only yield better investment decisions.
So generally, you think it's a sharing ideas, right? That's from your perspective?
It was definitely to share research. It was to share ideas. It was to just discuss an uncertain future that's a challenging, uncertain future.
So are you aware that actually on the website of this, it says the goal is to transform practices and policy that govern capital markets? Would you call it, as a business and investment professional, that's sharing ideas?
I'm not in the marketing department for Climate Action 100
It's not a marketing department. You're part of this group, so you subscribe that you're going to be transforming practices and policies. I mean, if you're part of that group, are you, then you are subscribing to this, what is on their website. You transforming practices and policies that govern capital markets. So you agree. That's a mission of the group you belong to.
Again, we make our decisions independently.
So you agree with that mission. You belong to that group. So that part of this you call as transforming practices and policies.
Our focus is on generating returns to pay pensions for generations.
I get it, but you're part of the group that states on their website they want to transform. Are you live in this group or are you staying with this group? They say on their website explicitly, we want to transform practices and policies that govern capital markets. So are you subscribing to this?
We believe a climate transition is happening and an energy transition needs to happen.
Transforming practices and policies. You stay behind this mission of this Climate Action 100. You stand behind the mission, transforming practices and policies on capital markets are governed.
We want every company to have a credible plan to navigate the climate transition. That way they can be profitable now, but they can be profitable 20 years from now and 50 years from now so that those profits can serve as cash flows back to our members so that we can pay pensions.
So as part of that, you are willing to collaborate, with different companies with potential opening the risk of collusion. Have you ever looked into potential risk that it could be collusion when company owners get together and say, we're going to transform the markets. We are going to make sure that markets is going to change. Have you ever discussed the potential risk that you have by antitrust violations?
As I say, I'm not an attorney, I'm an investor. But
But did you look at the investment risk? Did you look at that risk? Because you have to protect, you have fiduciary duty. So you open up yourself and your fund to risk. Have you ever assessed the risk that it could be potential antitrust violation?
We have gotten counsel, and everything that I know as an investor, I'm not an attorney, but I do have an economics background, both as a student and as a teacher. And everything that generated antitrust legislation was about anti-competitive behavior, and there is nothing anti-competitive that I know, and I can't even envision how anything could be unlawful with what goes on with Climate Action 100+.
So generally, when you have companies getting together and try to change the rules on the market, the boards, and they have a joint efforts, you don't see that as a potential problem and a risk to your investment in your pension fund.
Every member of Climate Action 100+, including ourselves, makes independent investment decisions.
But why did they join the group? Why couldn't you just do your independent decision? Why did you join the group?
We're a member of the New York Stock Exchange. Does that mean that we
but New
agree
York
with
is like you
everything
don't
they do?
discuss how you're going to be changing the boards, doing all these actions, when you're part of New York Stock Exchange. Hopefully you don't, but maybe that's what New York Stock Exchange already doing by now. It seems like SEC is. So I'm just saying, you actually have a goal that you collude, you agree to sit down and achieve. Do you think it's a potential risk?
We independently make every decision that we make, whether it's proxy voting or investment decisions or engagement decisions. Every decision is independent.
When they coordinated as a potential risk. Ms. Lauber, I have a question for you. You said climate change is a systematic financial risk. And I'm not going to argue. Climates have been changing. We used to have ice ages, how it's contributed. We're not going to science. But you've noticed a lot of this new industry using a lot of slave labor, like in China or DRC in Africa. Are you willing to say that, if we want to decrease or whatever, change something with fossil fuels, we're willing to increase use of slave labor or Chinese operation without any transparency? Do you think you would do it at an expense?
No.
So you're willing to bring more transparency? What's happening in China and with slave labor? Is your fund ever doing that, or you only worry just take down companies?
A strong tenet of what we do is seek more disclosure. And what you're
So you're willing to have more disclosure what on Chinese operations of companies that using that, or more disclosure what slave labor and use in some rare earth minerals and use in China. So you're willing to put that, because I haven't seen that.
Well,
so your fund is going to be as advocated for the boards to have more disclosures on that?
Absolutely. There is no justification. The practices that you're talking about are highly unacceptable, and I think they should be looked at and disclosed as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank the gentlelady from Indiana. I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a document that was referenced by Ms. Hageman from Wyoming by Arjuna Capital. It was written by one of the witnesses here, Ms. Lamb, and it said that, and here we are facing a second civil war. This one is cultural, led by pro-white, pro-Christian agenda. In other words, Make America Great Again. Without objection, that's in the record. That concludes today's hearing. We thank the witnesses for appearing before the committee today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witnesses or additional materials for the record. Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.